Welcome everyone to the Mysteries Abound podcast. This is your host Paul, and this is episode 94. This show is entitled The Mysterious Plane of Megalithic Jars. But first up, something from the skyandtelescope.com website. A new radio burst deepens a mystery, and this is written by Shannon Hall. Every so often things go bump in the quiet cosmic night, releasing a rush of energy in a few thousandths of a second and leaving astronomers mystified. One of these bumps came to light last year when astronomers announced the discovery of 4 brief but bright bursts of radio waves. All 4 bursts were discovered over the course of a year at the 64-metre Parkes radio telescope in Australia. Before that, 2 others were spotted with the Parkes scope, one in 2007 and a weaker candidate in 2012. The lack of any similar findings by other facilities led to speculation that these bursts might have been signals originating from sources on or near Earth. But a new detection of one of the so-called fast radio bursts with the Arecibo Observatory helps eliminate any doubt that these radio bursts are truly of cosmic origin, said co-author Victoria Caspi from the McGill University in Canada in a press release. It also sheds light on the mysterious phenomena that may be behind these exotic bursts. Fast radio bursts, or FRBs, have a distinct look to them. Besides only lasting a few thousandths of a second and releasing as much energy as the Sun will take 10,000 years to emit, their lower frequencies arrive noticeably later than their higher ones. This delay is due to plasma dispersion. Through any medium, longer wave radiation moves slightly slower than its shorter counterpart. Light from extragalactic objects travels through intergalactic space, which is teeming with electrons in clouds of cold plasma. The farther the light travels, the more electrons it will have to travel through, and the greater the time delay between the arriving wavelengths. By the time the light reaches Earth, it has been dispersed by an amount that is directly correlated with distance. Using the spread in the FRB's signals, astronomers calculated that the bursts likely originated anywhere from 5 to 10 billion light-years away. The latest burst was detected on November 2, 2012 at the Arecibo Observatory, which boasts the world's largest radio telescope with a dish spanning 305 metres. The burst was spread out 3 times wider than would be expected from a source within our galaxy, so the team thinks this set of radio waves came from a cosmological distance. But just what is releasing the radiation remains a mystery. The origin of these bursts is still highly uncertain, and it could turn out to be some new exotic object no one has imagined before, says lead author Laura Spittler from the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy in Germany. Co-author Jim Cords from Cornell fantasises that FRBs could be evaporating black holes or even cosmic strings. However, my bet is that they have something to do with neutron stars, which have provided us with other well-known but not completely understood bright pulses, he said. I hope I lose that bet. Neutron stars might be able to produce the pulses when they merge with each other. In the final milliseconds before the merger, the star's rotation periods and magnetic fields synchronize. Energetic charged particles would spiral along the strong magnetic field lines and emit a beam of radio radiation that would only persist for a few milliseconds remaining before the collision. Such a burst would be detectable across intergalactic space and explain both the duration and strength of these enigmatic signals. Other astronomers think these bursts need not be exotic events at cosmological distances. Several months ago, Abraham Loeb from Harvard and his colleagues suggested that FRBs might instead be eruptions from flare-prone stars in the Milky Way. If a thick envelope of plasma encased the stars, the electrons in these stellar coronas would be tightly packed enough to create the same observable effect as passing through billions of light-years of intergalactic medium, the team argues. But neither Spittler nor the team who reported the 4 FRBs last year finds this argument convincing. I can't say for certain our burst isn't from a galactic source, such as from a stellar corona, says Spittler, but she thinks an extragalactic origin is sounder. If FRBs come from within the Milky Way, they should be concentrated along the galactic plane. Yet most have appeared far from it. But Loeb argues that if flaring stars are located within a distance smaller than the thickness of the galactic disk, it makes the above argument meaningless. When you look at the brightest sun-like stars in the night sky, you see that they cover the sky uniformly, says Loeb. The reason is simple. In our galactic neighbourhood, the distribution of stars is roughly uniform around us. Only when you look at sufficiently faint stars, which are located at distances larger than the height of the disk, you find that they reside in a preferred strip across the sky. Cordes argues that although the spread of FRB's signals might look similar, whether they originate at cosmological distances or within stellar corona, the latter would add other effects that are not seen. So whether or not these signals originate from cosmological distances or within our own Milky Way depends on whom you ask. The study of other astrophysical phenomena, namely gamma-ray bursts and neutron stars, has also played out in this pattern. While astronomers have only detected a handful of FRBs, they estimate that they might occur roughly 10,000 times a day over the whole sky. Efforts are now underway to detect radio bursts at other facilities, and future observations should settle the debate, helping us to better understand these enigmatic pulses. The lake appeared in the Tunisian desert like a mirage. One minute there was nothing but scorching sand, the next a large expanse of turquoise water. From the www.theguardian.com website, mysterious lake in Tunisian desert turns from turquoise to green sludge. And it's written by Kim Wilshire. For locals roasting in the 40°C heat, the temptation to cool off in the inviting water quickly overcame any fears about the mysterious pool. Hundreds flocked to what quickly became known as the Lac de Gafsa, or Gafsa Beach, to splash, paddle dive and fling themselves from rocks into the lake, ignoring warnings that the water could be contaminated with carcinogenic chemicals, riddled with disease or possibly radioactive. Even after the water turned a murky green, they arrived in droves, undeterred. Some say it is a miracle, while others are calling it a curse, Lakhdar Saouid, a Tunisian journalist, told France 24 television. In the first few days, the water was crystal clear, a turquoise blue. Now it's green and full of algae, which means it's not being replenished. Mehdi Bilal was returning from a marriage in the north of the country when he spotted the lake in the desert canyon, 25 kilometres from the city of Gafsa, on the road from Larayes. Several long hours on the road without a break. I honestly thought I was hallucinating, he told journalists. I don't know much about science and thought it was magic, something supernatural. Gafsa has become the centre of the country's mining industry after phosphate was discovered in the southern Tunisian region in 1886. Tunisia is the world's fifth largest exporter of phosphate, which is used in industry. Shepherds discovered the lake, thought to be up to 18 metres deep and covering 1 hectare, 3 weeks ago. Local geologists suspect seismic activity may have ruptured the rock above the water table, sending the liquid to the surface. Other theories have suggested the canyon has simply collected rainwater. News of the lake's appearance has spread like wildfire, and now hundreds of people, eager to escape a heat wave, go there to swim, Saouid wrote in the Tunisia daily newspaper. This region is overflowing with large deposits of phosphate, which can leave behind radioactive residue, so there is a real risk that the water is contaminated and carcinogenic. There's no security of any kind. The site is certainly stunning, and there are many large rocks perfect for diving, but it has become infested with green algae, meaning the water is stagnant and conducive to diseases. 10 days ago, Hatef Awiji of Gafsa's Office of Public Safety warned that the lake is dangerous and not fit for swimming in. He said this was a cautionary measure while scientists take samples and verify the water. Depending on the results, we will take measures, he said. Since then there has been no further official news, though experts have warned that if the lake has indeed formed because of a rupture in the water table, the cracks from which the water came could cause the water to flow the other way and drag swimmers to the bottom. There's no security, no lifeguards, and civil protection people only turned up in the first few days, the journalist added. And if you'd like to have a look at the lake, there are a couple of photographs associated with the article as well as a Facebook link, the Lac de Gafsa Facebook page. David Paladin's true story is one so full of hardship, perseverance and metaphysical mystery that it has captured the imagination of many over the past 70 years. A Native American awakes from war trauma, speaking Russian, and paints like a dead Russian artist. And this is from the www.theepochtimes.com, and it's written by Tara McIsaac. Have you ever heard a story so powerful that it reverberated loudly through your interior landscape, or it stopped you cold in your tracks and made you think hard about your life? I did in 1994, and it's still with me today, wrote Adele Ryan McDowell in a selfgrowth.com post referring to Paladin's story told to her by author Carolyn Miss. For weeks and weeks after attending a professional conference where I first heard this story, I told everyone I encountered this tale, and I mean everyone. In 1985, Paladin told Miss about his days as a childhood alcoholic on a Navajo reservation, his time serving in World War II, a strange coincidence that saved his life, and the torture he endured as a prisoner of war. The most mysterious part of Paladin's story is the part in which the deceased Russian painter Vasily Kandinsky, 1866 to 1944, may have entered his body and stayed there. That's where reincarnation researcher Dr. H.N. Banjari comes in. Banjari wrote about Paladin's case in his book The Once and Future Life. The following account of Paladin's life draws from Mrs. book, Anatomy of the Spirit, the story as she told it to Dr. McDowell and Banjari's reports. An alcoholic by the time he was 11, Paladin left the reservation in his mid-teens and got a job on a merchant ship. He befriended a young German man on the ship with whom he spent much time. He began sketching as a hobby during this time. He was later drafted as a soldier in World War II, and he was sent as a spy behind Nazi lines. Native American languages were used to communicate reconnaissance information so that the transmissions would remain unintelligible if intercepted. Paladin was captured by the Nazis. His cruel punishment and torture in captivity included having his feet nailed to the floor. He was set to board a train to an extermination camp as a member of a lesser race, according to Nazi ideologies. A Nazi soldier prodded him along from behind with a rifle. When Paladin turned around, he found himself face to face with his German friend from his sailing days. The soldier had him transferred to a prisoner of war camp instead of the extermination camp. Paladin survived, but conditions were far from comfortable at the prisoner of war camp, and when the Allies opened up the camp, he was found dangerously emaciated, unconscious and dying. When he revived briefly, he was speaking Russian. They took him to the Russians, but when he was later able to give his name, rank and serial number in English, he was transferred back to the US military. He was in a coma for 2 years in a Michigan hospital following the war. When he awoke, he told a nurse, "I am an artist." He returned to his reservation, where the elders took drastic measures to help him solve a spiritual problem they could see beneath his physical ailments. They took the braces off his legs and cast him into a river. "David, call your spirit back," they commanded, as recounted in Mrs. Book. "Your spirit is no longer in your body. If you can't call your spirit back, we will let you go. No one can live without his spirit. Your spirit is your power." Paladin described for Miss what he experienced in that moment. "It was more difficult than enduring having my feet nailed to the floor. I saw the faces of those Nazi soldiers. I lived through all those months in the prison camp. I knew that I had to release my anger and hatred. I could barely keep myself from drowning, but I prayed to let the anger out of my body. That's all I prayed, and my prayers were answered." He recovered and he developed his art skills further, with a painting style strikingly similar to Kandinsky's. Dr. Banjari of the University of Rajasthan in India has studied cases of reincarnation in India as well as in the United States. Some of his cases have been featured in the published works of the late Dr. Ian Stevenson, famed reincarnation researcher at the University of Virginia. Banjari studied Paladin's case and found it an unusual one. Unlike when the soul of a deceased person reincarnates as a new life, a baby, Paladin's case could be a case of a soul entering a body at a time of weakness, when the main spirit may be absent. When hypnotised, Paladin would speak with a Russian accent, and he seemed familiar with details of Kandinsky's life. Though he painted in Kandinsky's style, he also progressed as an artist to develop his own style. Banjari felt that Paladin had regained his own spirit, but that Kandinsky's spirit had entered and influenced Paladin. Banjari noted that Paladin seemed in full control of himself while painting, not possessed by Kandinsky's spirit, though Paladin was in a sort of loose state, as though channeling inspiration. Paladin, who died in 1986, wrote in his book Painting the Dream about the state in which he painted. "My mind is relaxed with a soft focus, in a daydream mode of consciousness. I am aware of changing, shifting images in my mind. I don't know why the calligraphic forms appear. Kandinsky's geometric forms give a sense of order, of resonating in certain areas. They are like a language. The calligraphic thought forms are also a language. I think that Kandinsky and I are painting the structure of the universe, tuning into the collective consciousness, each of us telling the stories and seeing the reality in a unique way." A remarkable piece of scientific detective work has revealed the wooden ship found beneath the wreckage of the World Trade Center was built just before or during the American War of Independence. Even the location where the wood was grown appears to have been settled. From the www.iflscience.com website, The Origins of the Mysterious World Trade Center Ship Determined, and it's written by Stephen Luntz. In 2010, when digging the foundations for the buildings that will replace the Twin Towers, workers found a 9.75 metre long oaken partial hull, 7 metres below what is now street level. Hickory in the keel indicated the ship was almost certainly of North American origin, but its age and specific place of construction were initially a mystery. Isotopic dating isn't precise enough to tell us the age of the wood from which the ship is made, so instead researchers from Columbia University used the tree rings. As they report in probably the most attention-grabbing story ever published in tree ring research, the rings in the timber from different parts of the ship were found to be highly similar. Since the width of tree rings depends on the weather that season, trees growing nearby tend to have ring patterns that match each other fairly closely. When compared to 21 trees of the same species, white oak, from the Eastern American Seaboard team led by Dr. Dario Martin Benito, found exceptionally good matches to those from the Keystone State. Our results showed the highest agreement between the WTC ship chronology and 2 chronologies from Philadelphia and Eastern Pennsylvania, the paper reports. The last rings indicate the ship was built from trees felled in 1773, confirming previous theories. While the ship has potential to provide insight into the construction of the day, The authors note idiosyncratic aspects of the vessel's construction indicate that the ship was the product of a small shipyard. Philadelphia was one of the most, if not the most, important shipbuilding cities in the US at the time. And they had plenty of wood, so it made lots of sense that the wood could come from there, Martin Benito told Live Science. The wood had previously been found to have been infested with Lydrodus pediculatus, indicating a trip to the Caribbean at some point. The infestation with shipworm may have led to its premature demise, possibly being used as a sort of reclamation process to bolster Manhattan's defences against the sea. Although considered part of the World Trade Center site, the location of the ship was not excavated when the original towers were built. And from the www.dailymail.co.uk website, an article by Victoria Wollaston. Mystery of the Nazca lines deepens. Gales and sandstorms reveal geoglyphs of a snake and llama in the Peruvian desert. The mysteries of the Nazca lines carved into the Peruvian desert have intensified after gales and sandstorms revealed previously unseen ancient images. A pilot discovered a geoglyph of what appears to be a 196-foot-long snake, as well as a type of camelid, such as a llama, above an unidentified bird. These new lines join existing geoglyphs of a dog, hummingbird, condor and a monkey, thought to have been drawn by the ancient Nazca people between the 1st and 6th centuries. The discovery was made by pilot Eduardo Hernán Gómez de la Torre as he flew over the hills of El Genio Valley and Pampas Humana. Archaeologists are now working to confirm the authenticity of the lines. The geoglyphs, more commonly known as the Nazca lines, were first spotted from the air in 1939 when a pilot flew over the Nazca region of the Peruvian coastal highlands. They were designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994, and the area stretches more than 50 miles between the nouns of Nazca and Palpa, 248 miles south of Lima. The mystery about why they were created has been debated for decades. One theory is the geoglyphs are connected in some way to water. For example, a triangular geoglyph at the bottom of the Cerro Blanco mountain runs along the water veins inside the mountain, while the condor geoglyph is linked to a local legend which states that when the condor flies over the mountain, great rains follow. Similarly, the hummingbird geoglyph only appears in the summer following heavy rainfall. All of the drawings were said to have been drawn using a single line that never crosses itself, and were believed to be an appeal to the gods to bring rain. Experts believe the Nazca used to dance along the lines of the geoglyphs when they prayed for rain, and many of the same images appear on Nazca pottery. In December 2012, Professor Clive Ruggles of the University of Leicester said one of the shapes, a spiral motif traced in the Peruvian desert, is likely to have been a labyrinth created as a spiritual path. The huge images, which include hundreds of animals and complex mazes in the Nazca desert, can only clearly be seen from the air, giving rise to a number of explanations as to whom they were intended for. The Nazca lines are drawn into light-coloured strata, which contrasts with darker gravels on the plain. They are one of the most impenetrable enigmas of archaeology by virtue of their quantity, nature and size, as well as their continuity, says UNESCO. The concentration and juxtaposition of the lines, as well as their cultural continuity, demonstrate that this was an important and long-lasting activity. In general terms, the geoglyphs fall into two categories. The first group, of which about 70 have been identified, are said to represent natural objects, such as animals, birds and insects. Many of the images also appeared on pottery and textiles of the region. Other drawings represent flowers, plants and trees. A second is made from lines and more basic shapes, such as spirals, triangles and rectangles. And if you'd like to see more, including some photographs and things of the new images, visit the show notes at www.origins.info, click on the Mysteries Abound show note link, and then the link to this article, and on it are some photographs and some videos. That's quite a comprehensive display, really. The Plain of Jars in Xianquang Plain of Laos is one of the most enigmatic sites on Earth. The unusual sight of thousands of megalithic stone jars scattered across nearly 100 sites deep in the mountains of northern Laos has fascinated archaeologists and scientists ever since their discovery in the 1930s. From the www.theepochtimes.com website, an article by April Holloway, The Mysterious Plain of Megalithic Jars. The unusual site known as the Plain of Jars is dated to the Iron Age, 500 BC to 500 AD, and is made up of at least 3,000 giant stone jars up to 3 metres tall and weighing several tons. Most are made of sandstone, but there are others made of much harder granite and limestone. Because the jars have lip rims, it is presumed that all of them were originally covered with lids. Although a few stone lids have been recorded, it is more likely that the main material used was wood or rattan. The jars appeared to have been manufactured with a degree of knowledge of what materials and techniques were suitable. It is assumed that Plain of Jars people used iron chisels to manufacture them, although no conclusive evidence for this exists. Little is known of the people who carved the huge containers, and the jars themselves give little clues as to their origins or purpose. According to local legend, the jars were created by a race of giants, whose king needed somewhere to store his rice wine. The wine was to be consumed at a great feast to celebrate an illustrious military victory thousands of years ago. Legends tell of an evil king named Chow Anka, who oppressed his people so terribly that they appealed to a good king to the north named Kun Yeum to liberate them. Kun Yeum and his army came, and after waging a great battle on the plain, defeated Chow Anka. While some have maintained that the giant jars were used to collect the monsoon rainwater, most archaeologists believe that the jars were used as funerary urns. Excavation by Lao and Japanese archaeologists in the intervening years have supported this interpretation with the discovery of human remains, burial goods and ceramics around the stone jars. It is believed that the jars were used to place the corpses of deceased people where they were left to decompose or distill, a practice that has been common in Thailand and Laos, usually in pits. It is believed that the bodies were left in the jars for the soft tissue to decompose and the body to dry out before being cremated. Once they had been cremated, the ashes would have been returned to the urns or perhaps buried in a sacred place, freeing the jars for reuse to decompose another body. Archaeologists still don't have all the answers, but unfortunately their work has been slowed down by the fact that the Plain of Jars is one of the most dangerous archaeological sites in the world. Scattered over the plains are literally thousands of tons of unexploded bombs, landmines and other unexploded military ordnance, which contaminate more than 35% of the province's total land area and continue to threaten the lives of the 200,000 people who now live in Xianquang. It was the largest and fiercest warship in the world, named the Mars for the Roman god of war, but it all went up in a ball of flame in a brutal naval battle in 1564, consigning 800 to 900 Swedish and German sailors and a fortune in gold and silver coins to the bottom of the Baltic Sea. From the news.nationalgeographic.com. The Cursed Warship Revealed, with treasure on board, and this is written by Jane J. Lee. Now, a few years after the ship's discovery, researchers have concluded that the one-of-a-kind ship is also the best preserved ship of its kind, representing the first generation of Europe's big three-masted warships. Naval historians know a lot about 17th century ships, but very little about warships from the 16th century, said Johan Rönnby, a professor of maritime archaeology at the Södertörn University in Sweden, who is studying the 197-foot-long wreck. It's a missing link, he says, whose work is funded in part by a grant from the National Geographic Society's Global Exploration Fund. The 1500s is an important period, he said, because it's when big three-masted warships started being built. Researchers have found cargo from early warships called galleons, slightly later iterations of the type of vessel the Mars exemplifies. And they've recovered pieces of actual ships, including the English flagship Mary Rose, which sank during a battle in 1545, but never have they found something as well preserved as the Mars. Rönnby and his team want to leave the Mars on the sea floor and instead use three-dimensional scans and photographs to share the wreck with the world. Rönnby, with help from Richard Lundgren, part owner of the Ocean Discovery, a company of professional divers that assists in maritime archaeological work, and others, has been piecing together photomosaics and scanning the wreck to produce 3D reconstructions. With funding from the National Geographic Society Weight Grants program, they are working this summer to complete their scans of the entire ship. Bringing a ship out of the ocean is expensive, and it can cause significant harm to artefacts. The laser scans Lundgren and his colleagues have taken are accurate to within 0.08 inches or 2 millimetres, more than enough to satisfy most researchers. Using some relatively new tools and methods, archaeologists now have a chance to reconstruct the last minutes of the ship and the souls on board, Lundgren says, and gain some insight into how people behaved on a battlefield. Treasure hunters, archaeologists and history aficionados have sought the Mars over the years, but they were unsuccessful until the late spring of 2011, when a group of divers located one of maritime archaeologists' greatest finds in 246 feet of water. Legend has it that a spectre rose from the inferno to guard the Mars, the prize of the Swedish Navy, against ever being discovered. The discovery was the culmination of a 20-year search by Lundgren and his brother Ingemar and their colleague Fredrik Skö. The men dreamed of finding the mighty Mars since making a childhood visit to a Stockholm museum housing another iconic Swedish warship named the Vasa. Richard and Ingemar Lundgren became professional divers in part because of that dream. The Mars sank on May 31, 1564, off the coast of a Swedish island called Öland. She came to rest on the seafloor, tilted to her starboard, or right side. Low levels of sediment, slow currents, brackish water, and the absence of a mollusk called a shipworm, responsible for breaking down wooden wrecks in the oceans in as little as 5 years, combined to keep the warship in remarkable condition. What makes this find even more exciting, said Lundgren, is that the Mars didn't sink because of a design flaw or poor seamanship. Mars was a functioning war machine that performed extremely well in battle, he explained. She sank loaded to the gills with cannons. Even her crow's nests had guns, sailors, and all the accoutrements needed to run a ship built for war, including 8 different kinds of beer. This warship was totally unheard of firepower for her time, said Lundgren, and it's those cannons that played a role in her demise. The Mars went down while engaged with a Danish force allied with soldiers from a German city called Lübeck. The Swedes routed the Danes on the first day of battle, said Rönnby, so on the second day the Germans decided to press their luck. German forces began lobbing fireballs at the Mars and eventually succeeded in pulling alongside the burning ship so soldiers could board her. As gunpowder on the warship fueled the inferno, the heat became so intense that the cannons began to explode, said Rönnby. Those explosions eventually sank the warship. Legend, however, tells a slightly different story. The Swedish kings at the time were busy trying to consolidate their position, Ronby explained. But the Catholic Church was a problem for the new kings because it was so powerful, he said. So in trying to diminish the Church's power, monarchs like Eric XIV, who commissioned the Mars, would confiscate church bells, melt them down and use the metal to make cannons for their new warships. Legend has it that carrying those repurposed church bells doomed the Mars to a watery grave. The warship carried either 107 or 173 cannons of many different sizes. "It's not just a ship, it's a battlefield," said Ronby. "Diving on the wreck, you're very close to this dramatic fire on board. People killing each other, everything was burning and exploding," he said. In fact, when Lundgren and his colleagues brought a piece of the ship's hull to the surface, they noticed a charred scent wafting from the burnt wood. In the end, I think that's the aim of archaeology, to discuss ourselves and the human aspects of a site, Ronby said. And from the paranormal.about.com website. True Ghost Stories for August 2014. Shadow Man Just Passing Through, and this is by Dawn B. We live on a road that was once a Native American trail through the large swamp that exists here. It's well known and is featured in many stories and history books. This road was also used during the Civil War when the Confederates stole several thousand head of cattle from the Union Army and rustled them away in the night. There is a great deal of human history here, from Native American to European and American. This area was hit very hard during the Great Depression, and the local tax collector was a dirty lowlife who intentionally withheld tax bills from landowners, all farmers, until he knew the bills would be too high for them to pay. Then he would buy the property for pennies on the dollar. His property, now called a ranch, is not far from me. There are many houses on that property still, not much left but foundations and chimneys. But a few still have caved-in walls and furniture, huge hardwoods around them with initials carved into them. One can hear the echoes of the lives lived there, the love and the sorrow. That was to give you the background. I have been a night owl most of my adult life. Waitress, bartender, nurse, all night shifts. So I still have those hours. One night I was sitting in the den on the ground floor of my split-level home. The room is 15 by 25, and I was sitting facing the shorter side, where I was watching TV without paying it much mind. More for white noise because I was really reading. I do most nights. As I was sitting there was a silence in the house, but for the low volume of the TV. The room got suddenly quite cold. I mean freakish cold. I do not usually get goosebumps, yet I did. This was not just the sensation of cold, but it was like hearing a soundless warning. I was sensing some impending thing. That sounds remarkably trite, but I cannot explain it any better. Within 15 seconds of this sensory explosion interrupting my alone time with the house asleep, through the far wall, a man-shaped figure, with edges that were sharp and defined, came through the wall. He was there, and he was running. Then he saw me and looked directly at me. He slowed down to a fast walk, then a regular walk, and stopped for a second or two as we just stared at one another. He did not have red eyes. He had no eyes. He was blacker than night, so black he would have looked like sunshine on a black night, because his darkness was so intense. I could not breathe. I forgot how to for a second. I did not sense evil. I did sense intelligence. He cocked his head as he was staring at me, like I was a curiosity. I never took my eyes off him. When he cocked his head, I gave him a very slight affirmative nod, never taking my eyes from his face or where it seemed his face would be. His body turned away, and then he picked his arms up like he was going to keep running, turned his head to see the other wall and doorway, but kept one eye on me and ran out of the other wall. I sat frozen for a few minutes, processing just what had happened. It sounds crazy, but it makes no difference. I have come to the realization I was not dreaming. I saw him, got his vibe, and he got mine. His utter strangeness scared the hell out of me once rational thought started working again. I did not know who or what he was. It was male in the sense of size and structure, but no features could be discerned beyond that. He was as black as a hole in reality and creation can be. This happened on an autumn night in 2012. I have not seen him since. We are moving soon, but it's not soon enough. And also from the paranormal.about.com website, another true ghost story from August 2014. Pushed by an Upset Spirit by Susan D. I am a 49-year-old woman who grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I have lived in Staten Island for over 15 years now. I have seen, heard, felt and experienced many paranormal meetings in my life, but I will now write of my most recent. Before I begin, I would like to say that although I am fascinated with the supernatural, I am sometimes quite frightened by it. At the time this started happening, my son went off to attend college at Penn State, and my husband and I were separated. I spent most nights alone in an 8-room house close to the water in Tottenville. It is a quiet, middle-class neighbourhood which has a lot of history. The first settlers came to this end of Staten Island, and the British and the Americans fought directly on this shoreline. When we first bought this home, it was a new construction with a matching home to the left on a nice-sized piece of land. For many years, nothing was ever out of the ordinary here. When my boy left to attend school, I started hearing footsteps on the staircase and on the upstairs landing. I did not feel threatened, as I have seen and felt evil entities before. At first, these footsteps were harmless, actually almost playful. They were male footsteps, for this I am sure. When I was downstairs, the footsteps and mild banging would increase. I would yell up to please knock it off. Sometimes he would stop, other times he would move very fast throughout the rooms. I found that if I ignored it, he would make extra noise to get my attention, almost like a child would do for attention. But these were the footsteps of a grown man. This went on for a year or two until one day upstairs in my bedroom I felt a male presence beside me. Now, this is a barrier that I do not like crossed. It frightens me. Hey, you can run up and down the stairs and hall, but please stay out of my space. Shortly after that, I felt something lightly push me forward on the staircase. I fell forward. I was not expecting that. I felt something push past me. Okay, you are now being a bit too aggressive for me. I started to not feel so welcoming to this spirit. I decided to do a bit of research. Since my house was a new construction, I decided to speak to some older neighbours. None remembered a previous home here, just a huge tree. We bought the house with a 70-foot oak tree centred in our front yard. It was over 100 years old and was now dying. It was a beautiful tree that gave our home shade and character. We had no choice but to take it down. It broke my heart. We will get back to the tree and why I believe it is relevant. There is a tiny home a few hundred feet down my street. A lovely couple in their 90s have lived there since they married 70-something years back. I stopped to chat before entering my car to go to work. They are saddened that we had to remove the tree. They begin this story. When they first married, an old couple had a house set back on my property. The man would come out each day to trim and groom the tree. Its branches and leaves spread to the other side of the street, but he kept it beautifully manicured. This was his daily ritual. The property also had a huge well in the backyard. The wife, being a depressed woman, tried to commit suicide in the well, but was found and put into an institution where she later died. The man remained here until he passed at age 86. He tended the mighty oak until right before he died. Wow, just wow, could that be my ghost? We cut down his lovely tree. We loved it too, but it was a sick tree. I heard the footsteps louder this week. I decided to tell the man that I'm sorry. I explained that the tree was dying and was a danger because of its size. As the months go on, I heard less and less of this man. Let's flash forward. My son graduated college. He has a steady girl and they bought a puppy, a dachshund, and although very sweet, he is a nervous little one. I was babysitting Charlie for the week while the kids were away. I heard the footsteps. Charlie was barking at the foot of the staircase. He came to get me on the couch. The banging upstairs got very loud. I stood with Charlie as he was frantically growling and barking. He looked from me to the stairs. I said, "I know, Charlie, I know, I hear him too." Charlie saw him. I started to speak sternly. Charlie was going crazy. The footsteps were now loud bangs. I told this man to please go where he belongs. I again apologised for his tree, but instructed him to leave now. It was utter chaos. Out of nowhere, I heard a blood-curdling female scream. It lasted a good 10 seconds. Was this the wife? I do not know. Charlie hid behind my leg. Everything became quiet. This was 18 months ago. I have not heard a bang, footsteps, or felt any presence in my home since. I hope they have found their new home, where there are many trees. In the spring of 1955, as the Cold War intensified, and the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union escalated at a shocking pace, America, as it had many times before, detonated an atomic weapon in the Nevada desert. The test was not especially noteworthy. The weapon's yield was not dramatically larger or smaller than that of any previous A-bombs. The brighter-than-the-sun flash of light, the mushroom cloud and the staggering power unleashed by the weapon were all byproducts familiar to anyone who had either witnessed or paid attention to coverage of earlier tests. And yet today, 6 decades later, at a time when the prospect of nuclear tests by rogue states like North Korea and Iran is once again making headlines and driving international negotiations and debate, the very banality of one long-forgotten atomic test in 1955 feels somehow more chilling than other more memorable or era-defining episodes from the Cold War. After all, whether conducted in the name of deterrence, defence or pure scientific research, the May 1955 blast was in a very real sense routine. This is not to suggest that the scientists, engineers and other professionals involved at Yucca Flat were somehow cavalier about detonating atomic weapons. But it's worth remembering that in the first half of 1955, the US conducted more than a dozen nuclear test explosions in Nevada alone. After a while, the mushroom clouds from these tests, visible from Las Vegas 60 miles away, had become tourist draws. One needn't be a pacifist, an anti-nuclear crusader, or a modern-day Luddite to shudder at the thought of nuclear explosion after nuclear explosion ripping through the desert air of the American Southwest. Here, Life.com presents pictures, most of which never ran in Life magazine, made in the Nevada desert by photographer Lou Mustine shortly after a 1955 atomic bomb test. These are not political pictures. They are eerily beautiful, unsettling photographs made at the height of the Cold War, when the destructive power of the detonation was jaw-droppingly huge, but positively minuscule compared to today's truly terrifying thermonuclear weapons. As Life told its readers in its May 16, 1955 issue, in which some of these photos appeared, a day after the 44th nuclear test explosion in the US rent the still Nevada air, observers cautiously inspected department store mannequins, which were poised dishevelled, but still haughty on the stand in the homes of Yucca Flat. The figures were residents of an entire multi-million-dollar village built to test the effects of atomic blasts on everything from houses to clothes to canned soup. The condition of the figures, one charred, another only scorched, almost another untouched, showed that the blast, equivalent to 35,000 tonnes of TNT, was discriminating in its effects. As one phase of the atomic test, the village and figures help guide civil defence planning and make clear that even amid atomic holocaust, careful planning could save lives. There is in such words and in such sentiments an almost unrecognisable optimism. It's tempting to say an innocence that is no longer available to us when it comes to honest discussions of, as Life put it, atomic holocaust. With conversations about nuclear tests, both theoretical and real, so very much in the news these days, these pictures from more than half a century ago serve as a quiet reminder of just how horrific and deranged the very notion of nuclear warfare really is. And that introduction was written by Ben Cosgrove. This is a slideshow of 22 photographs, which, if you'd like to see, comes from the life.time.com website. All in black and white, all quite eerie, and just a reminder of what it was like back in the days of the 1950s nuclear tests. Worth a look. And as with the previous story from the life.com website, there are often sites that I find that are interesting, suitable for the Mysteries Abound podcast, but are mainly photographs, so it's a bit hard to do those on an audio show, so I just put a link to them in the show notes. And this is the second one that I found a little while ago, and I've decided to put into this podcast. So if you're visiting the life.com website, it would be quite cool to have a look at this one as well, because it's really quite eerie. It reminds me of something out of the Walking Dead TV show, where you see those old cars all lined up. But of course in these there's no zombies wandering around. From the www.slightlywarped.com website, the 70-year-old traffic jam. Welcome to the Chatillon car graveyard in Belgium. The urban legend says that the cars belong to US servicemen who couldn't take them back to the States after World War II. But a simple look at the cars rotting away in the forest debunks that commonly held belief, as many of them weren't made until the 50s and 60s. Truthfully, it might be nothing more than a car graveyard, as no one seems to have a concrete story on how the cars got there or why. Whatever the case, the 500 cars that made up this zombie-like traffic jam were cleared away in 2010 over environmental concerns. Like I said, if you're interested, it's worth a look. It is really quite eerie, especially with all the overgrown vegetation. And whilst looking at the photographs, it's almost a shame that they had to clear it away back in 2010, but considering the metal and the chemicals and the petrol and the oil and all that stored in the cars, it was probably an environmental nightmare. But definitely worth a look. This story is a true, unembellished personal experience that occurred on December 9, 2010. From the www.creepypasta.com, Genevieve's Smile. And this story is credited to Dan Davis. I've always been a sceptical, logical person, a critical thinker. At a young age, my father, a doctor, told me that everything outside the physical realm is a myth, after I had a nightmare about demons. Hocus pocus, he said, an illusion created by errors of the human mind. By the age of 5, I didn't believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy. Nevertheless, I loved horror movies and supernatural subjects because I thought they were fascinating, even from a scientific standpoint. And I think on some subconscious level, I wanted to discover something so unbelievable as a ghost. That's probably one of the reasons I decided to visit the North Trestle. The North Trestle is an old, outdated railroad bridge that towers high over a narrow part of North Lake, a winding river valley flooded by a dam over 60 years ago. The bridge is even older than the lake, And as with all old things, people perpetuate rumours about the bridge being haunted by a ghost of some kind. The story goes that Genevieve, a wealthy girl who went to our high school in the 60s, used to secretly meet her female lover at the bridge on moonlit nights. When her controlling mother found out and wouldn't let her see the girl anymore, she hung herself from the bridge. Apparently if you walk across the bridge on a full moon, you'll see her. Genevieve was a classic story every freshman at our high school had heard, and I thought it was just stupid. One day I decided it'd be fun to go to that bridge and film it for our school newscast, hopefully to put the dumb story to rest. Chris, our editor, was all for going with me, and our friend Jenna wanted to go just to see something happen firsthand. 1 week later, on a full moon, we grabbed a camera and a 2 litre of Mountain Dew and headed for the bridge. We took the North Road farther and farther out of town until only pine trees and cornfields surrounded us. This was part of Catawba County, most people didn't think about, a dark corner of the map. Thank God for the full moon, I thought to myself. We hadn't seen a street light for miles, and I have pretty bad night blindness. Even basic shapes I can't make out if the sun is down or the lights are dim. After what seemed like forever, we finally saw moonlight shimmering on the water and parked in a marina near the bridge. "Oh, it's cold," Jenna shouted as soon as we opened the car door. "Good," I said. "We need a cold, clear night like this. I don't even think we need a light for the camera." But for some reason the moonlight piercing the cold air was more eerie than total darkness. The way the light trickled through the pine trees to the bare ground. In some odd way, it felt like the night wanted to show us something. As we walked along the rusted railroad towards the bridge, Chris spoke up. "So, we walked to the middle of the bridge. Dan, you filmed some there, then we walk to the other side of the bridge, then come back. We get at least 10 minutes of film, and I'll edit out the boring parts. Good plan?" "Good plan, but the whole thing's going to be boring parts," I said. "You don't know that, Dan," Jenna replied. Walking on the Trestle Bridge was nerve-wracking in itself. The gaps were easily large enough to step through, and as soon as the water was below us, we were at a dizzying height. "Could you jump off this thing? Maybe we should come back here in summer," Chris noted. "It's got to be pretty deep," I added. "Well, you two can have fun with that," Jenna replied. She was usually the voice of reason. Just before we got to the middle of the bridge, I was paralysed. A cloud had covered the moon, and I might as well have been in a cave. "Hold up, guys. I can't see where to walk." They were both shocked. "You can't even see the bridge." "I can't even see my own hand," I clarified. "Just chill out and give me a second." I felt around for the wood ties and made slow progress. "Why did we trust you with the camera?" they laughed. "Don't trip and drop that thing." To my relief, the cloud passed and the moon came out again. Finally, we made it to the bridge's midpoint and sat down to film some uninteresting material. Here we are at the North Trestle, said to be the one and only place to see Genevieve's ghost. High school students in our area have heard this story for over a decade. Chris narrated enthusiastically for several minutes until the low battery light came on. "Oh, crap," he said. "Dan, walk down to the other side of the bridge and come back. That should be enough time for Jenna to go and get the spare battery." "Yeah, right. I'm not going by myself," Jenna spoke up. Fine, I'll go with you," he compromised. They set off back towards the car, and I went in the other direction to reach the other side. Only 5 minutes later, I heard a loud, high-pitched scream. "Jenna!" I said out loud. I reasoned she must have tripped or fallen, but when I looked back down the long track, I saw that they had both already made it off the bridge. The scream also sounded like it came from the other direction, the direction in which I was headed. I kept walking, though somewhat reluctantly. For the first time, a cold breeze blew. Some dull, low noise was now humming. I wasn't sure what it was, or if it was just my heightened hearing detecting some distant disturbance. A few minutes later, I was at the last quarter of the bridge, feeling more confident that the North Trestle was just a bridge, and that the only trace of Genevieve was 6 feet underground somewhere. Dust by now. That confidence was shattered, however, when I looked towards the sky. A cloud was on its way towards the full moon again, and beyond that there were a few more clouds. "Damn," I said aloud. Seconds later, I was cloaked in darkness. All right, nothing to panic about, I tried telling myself. But the sound of that bizarre scream was still in my mind, and the low humming noise was getting louder. I shuffled and felt for the right steps, slowly making my progress towards the other side of the bridge. "Daniel!" Something ahead of me whispered faintly. I froze. It had to be the wind. At that point I just wished I could see something, even just a shadow. But there was no hint that my eyes could give me. I walked forward. I thought I heard breathing, as I slowly found the right places to step. Suddenly something rushed past me. I turned around and shouted, "Hey, who's that?" Now I knew my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. Someone was here. It had to be someone there to play a prank on us, I thought, or some homeless wanderer who wanted to be left alone. I stopped and placed the camera on the track. Having a camera is one more reason for someone to kill me, I reasoned. I'd go back and get it later. For a few minutes I waited until my phone rang. It was Jenna. "Dan, we have the battery. Is that you coming towards us? Did you film the other side yet?" I shouted at first chance, "No, it's not me. Go back to the car. I think someone's here." She hung up. Okay, I thought to myself, how do I get back to the car? This person trapped me. I thought about going to the other side, but I'd never be able to find my way in those woods. Even if I could, I'd be on the other side of the lake, and there wasn't another bridge for miles. "Damn," I said aloud again. "Damn," I said aloud again. I would have to confront this person, say I'll leave and never come back, and get off this terrible bridge. I shuffled some more in the dark, heading back the way I came. Minutes later, the moon came out again, and I saw it. A figure was coming my way. The bridge was only lit for a few seconds until the moon again disappeared behind a cloud. I shuffled forward, my shaking leg almost falling through a gap. The moon came out again, and it was much closer, only about 200 yards away. But still it looked just like a shadow. The moon disappeared again, and I shuffled forward, now shaking so much I thought I might fall. When the moon came back out, I stopped cold. The figure was closer now, only about 100 yards away, and I could make out its unusual features. It was limping forward, its arms swinging as if they were sewn on. Greasy black hair hung down to its knees, and its head was tilted to the side. But the face, that's what made my blood turn cold. My stomach feels sick. It was off-white with a green hue, and blank. No eyes, nose or mouth. Just a wrinkled texture like a pumpkin that had rotted. I prayed that the next cloud wouldn't cover up my only light again. But my prayer went unanswered. Darkness fell again. "It's someone in a mask. It's someone in a mask. It's someone in a mask," I tried telling myself. But something in me said otherwise. The way it moved was just unnatural. I tried backing up slowly, almost tripping. How cold is this water, I thought. How high am I? Wait, what am I thinking? Why is that an option? What are my other options? I looked up and saw the moon, just about to reveal itself. My legs were shaking like jello, barely holding me up. I had the feeling someone gets just before they bungee jump, though I didn't have a bungee cord. Moonlight crept out from behind the cloud one more time, and I caught one glance. One terrible glance. It stood 10 feet in front of me, head tilted to the side. I was wrong about one thing. It did have a mouth. A hideous smile spread wide across its blank face. Its wrinkled skin spread to reveal black gums and jagged teeth. "Daniel," the smiling mouth said. It took one step forward. Instinct took over, like when your hand pulls back after touching a hot pan. My legs threw me sideways, my mind not even calculating how far I needed to jump to avoid the concrete foundation below. My stomach dropped, but I didn't even look at the water I was headed towards. I didn't straighten out or prepare for the impact for all that time. As the cold air rushed past my body, the image of the grotesque smile was imprinted in my mind. Only at the last second did I twist and avoid my back hitting the water first, as I narrowly missed the concrete. Even submerged in icy water, all that was on my mind was her smile. Even shivering in my boxers on the car ride home, all I could see, was Genevieve's smile. The music for today's podcast came from the musicalley.com website. The bandwidth is provided by TalkShoe at www.talkshoe.com. The show notes are held at the Origins podcast website, www. The music for today's podcast came from the musicalley.com website. The bandwidth is provided by TalkShoe at www.talkshoe.com. The show notes are held at the Origins podcast website, www.origins.info. And for those who don't know, we do have a Facebook site associated with my podcasts. It's www.facebook.com/Paul Rexy. Paulrexy, or click on the link at the show notes. And I'd also like to thank these people for sending a donation to the podcasts to help with their production. Pierre Edwardson, Brian Bigler, Jeff Chapman, Sean Yarnell and Mary Brown. Your help is greatly appreciated, everyone.